Aloha. Today's episode is brought to you by the University of Hawaii College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources and the Seeds of Wellbeing, or SOW project. This podcast is supported by the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, or FRSAN, grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Aloha. Welcome everyone to the SOW podcast, aimed to provide educational support, information, guidance, and outreach to farmers, ranchers, and our allied agriculture producers in Hawaii. We are your hosts, Oshiro and
Shannon Sand.
And today we're going to be talking about the SOW project with Thao Lee, a professor in human development and the family studies program at CTAHR, and our project director of SOW.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, Thao. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and current position?
Aloha, everyone. Thank you, Shannon, Mele. Thank you for including me on this first podcast. I'm happy to introduce the project itself and who I am. I'm currently, like Shannon said, professor in human development and family studies. So prior to that, I was at Colorado State University, and I gave up tenure and promotion to come to Hawaii because I simply love Hawaii, and I find Hawaii to be my true home. So rather than being a goat, I realize I'm a fish. So here I am. And this
I like that.
and this project fits perfectly with my heart and interest in promoting well-being. I do have a background in behavioral science, master's in public health at UC Berkeley. I'm also a PhD in psychology, and always been fascinated by the working of the minds, what makes us well and what stresses us out.
Nice.
Oh, that's very interesting, Thao. And I like how you put that, being a fish on the island, right? It's a good thing. It's surrounded by water.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what is the SOW project and what's some of the goals and objectives of the project?
Yeah, so the SOW stands for Seeds of Wellbeing. And so, of course, what is well-being? Well-being is not just physical well-being, where you're well-nourished in terms of eating good food and good nutrition, but also the well-being of the mind and the emotion, spiritual and social and relationships. So the well-being encompasses all these different dimensions, which are really important. So how do we nurture and foster and facilitate well-being, particularly in these very challenging times as we all are undergoing?
Oh, yeah.
And particularly for farmers, right?
Yeah,
I think farming and agriculture production used to be on the top in terms of happiest profession, if you were to look back in history. But there's not many studies now that are showing that farmers are happy and enjoying what they're doing. So what is going on?
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. And I think we always hear so many different terms relating to stress and wellness or well-being that are mentioned in different conversations and whatnot that we hear. So can you maybe explain a little bit more about what is the differences between these different terms, and why should it matter to our ag producers?
Yeah, so wellness is more about preventing disease. Like it's like you go to a checkup for the doctor because they're looking for wellness. They don't really necessarily ask for your well-being, like checking your, blood pressure, your weight, glucose check, right? So it's the wellness. And the term wellness itself goes back to the 1960s when there was spa was developing, like take a break, take a break from what you're doing. Because, but it has to do with like recovery, like from potentially effects of what you're doing in your life. Whereas well-being is not simply adaptation to existing circumstances that you're just managing, but it's thriving and flourishing. So for agriculture producers, how are they thriving? Not just simply adapting to changing circumstances and making a living, but having purpose and meaning in a way that when you wake up, you're like, I'm ready for the day and I love what I do and I love the people I'm with. And no matter what happens and all the challenges, it's a challenge that I can overcome and deal with, right? Because we know that farmers and ag producers are very resilient. But it's not simply just resiliency, because sometimes the structures that are in place and we adapt to that structure, it could be, not very great structures that we're adapting to, and we're functioning, but we're not thriving. So in this project, we're looking at ways to foster not only adaptation so that we can make a living and feed our families, but flourishing. And that's what I'm really interested in. It's the flourishing, just like a flower, all the conditions needs to be in place, or a fruit tree to have beautiful fruits. What are the conditions for ag producers so that we are producing wonderful fruits for ourselves and for our families and our community?
So how are you planning on going about that, or figuring out what producers' needs are in terms of well-being?
Okay, so like with everything, it's not an individual effort. So I have a wonderful team. I've got Shannon and Melelani. You guys are here helping me, or helping us on this project, and we've got other extension faculty on our team. So it's a team approach. And so what we're doing is, one of the first thing we're doing is a need assessment, because there's studies out there, and we have anecdotal evidence, because we know we have extension folks out there, and you guys know what sort of are stressors right now that are, but unless you have data, right? So not simply anecdotal events, data is power. And it's like, if once we have good data, then we can say, yes, farmer well-being does matter, because we're trying to map out, like, what is the relationship between stressors and coping with, let's say, heart disease or diabetes or flourishing, right? Unless we have data, we can only have like, I know this is related. Maybe, maybe, Hilo's got these issues and Maui's got this, but we don't really know. We have these strong intuitive sense, which are really important. But one way is for this project is giving us, data. And of course, data can be helpful to advocate for more resources once we have the information and in some empirical way.
So is it like a baseline survey, a needs assessment? What exactly are we up to basically? What's the plan?
Yeah, so it's a need assessment, but what I think is really unique that we're doing in Hawaii, and we're hoping that Hawaii would become the model for the other states, because the other states are doing the same thing. But Hawaii is so unique in terms of the multicultural population and the diversity of small farmers, which is unlike many on the mainland. So we've got the survey translated into 7 different languages, including English is one. English is one. So we're hoping to reach out, to other multilingual populations to information. And we're looking at not only the stressors, but the coping styles and what are resources that ag producers and their family want. So we're not only asking the primary ag producer, but we're asking their family members, because sometimes, the spouse and the children knows a lot more, and they see a lot more and willing to disclose than the primary ag producer. So we're reaching out to the family members, and that's not necessarily being done on the mainland. So I think that's going to be our contribution to, hey, you guys on the mainland, maybe you should ask, be more in depth and really connect with the family members as well.
Yeah, because I think, families are generally intimately involved with farming and ranching, at least in my experience. And so they have a great idea of what's going on, what those stressors are for whoever is the main farm manager, let's call it that. So, or what, but and so I think that's, but not even just for the main farm manager, but just for the whole family in general, because it might be different for a family unit than it is for an individual as well. So I think that's
definitely. I think especially when you're working in a family setting, for a business, you that's your team, right? So you need all those legs of your team to be well supporting the whole entire entity of your business. So that's very important, I think.
And sometimes your teams don't work very well, just like in families. So
communication is key with families. It's a big, big thing.
Very
that
key.
I've done a lot of stuff related to, and it's a big thing. People don't really realize how much families need to communicate with each other, especially if they're involved in a business together, like farming or ranching. So
right. And when you're irritated and or
affects everything.
Right. So how do you communicate in a way that's skillful and helpful and not compromise your business or your family relationships? Right.
Yeah. Definitely not over Sunday dinner, Christmas dinner, any sort of holiday is the recommendation. Not those.
That's the best thing is to designate a time that you meet, you know, outside
have an
of all
actual
normal
like
things.
family business meeting to discuss all of that
definitely.
stuff. Yeah, that's always good.
Yeah. So the survey, the needs assessment, then how is it being shared, and how do people complete the survey or get access to it?
Oh, well, there's one is to the link to our website. So right here, right?
Yes, we will share that. We will put it in the show notes as well as the description box. So
okay. And then it's, of course, you know, through my amazing extension team, we're distributing it through all the various connections. So if you see it in your email, please do not hit the delete button and ignore it, because we we really value your input and perspective, because otherwise we're going to be developing resources that, you know, we think you might need, but it may not be what you really want. Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing about, and the surveys that go out, you know, it takes a little bit of time. This one is, how long do you expect this to take for someone to complete?
10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. So 10 to 15 minutes of your time to complete this survey helps give us information and data that we can actually put forward to other projects or funding to be able to provide resources to help address some of the information that's provided through the survey. So very important. And we get it. We always sending you guys surveys. We understand, but
and we appreciate y'all filling them out every single time.
We value your input so much. So.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, please. Right.
Yeah. Oh, is there anything else, Thao, you'd like to share about the SOW project or whatnot about the needs assessment survey?
Well, you know, I think, you know, we sort of intuitively all know what are the common stressors, right? But unless it's until it's shown in, you know, in terms of empirical data, like raw data and actually data. And also, like, people say, well, you know, how does feral ungulates and the climate changes, how, you know, maybe we should just completely focus on that, because but they change all the time, these stressors, right? Today it's this, and then tomorrow's another bug, and next day is another pest, and they change. We know what pests are. They come and go. People are pests too, right? So, but you know, so how do you manage? And then you've got pesty minds sometimes, thinking ways that are not so nice to others. So how are the skills? What are the tools so that no matter what pest comes along or what's the next climate challenge, that your skills are, there's foundation in your ability to navigate through all this, right? So the pests may change, but how you manage and deal with each, you have a strong foundation, then we'll be with you all the time. And so, because I think one of the biggest issue we have right now, it's that uncertainty. What's going to be the next challenge? Yeah. What's going to be the next obstacle? Right. And so if we're constantly being pulled and yanked in different ways, like, okay, today we do this, and then tomorrow we do this, and then next day we do that. And it's like, oh my God, I'm so confused. What am I supposed to do next? And I think that caused a lot of uncertainty in terms of anxiety about what we need to do. So hopefully some of the workings that we're doing on this project is giving folks some toolkits and skills so that they can navigate through all these different life challenges.
So you also mentioned, Thao, that you may want to do some interviews with some of our producers. You want to share maybe about that, just so that if they see that invitation, they know what to, we'll give a little heads up to that invitation that may come floating their way.
Yeah, thank you, Melly, for asking about that. So at the end of the survey, there's also an option for a deeper dive into these questions, because the survey is mainly, you know, kind of superficial in terms of check boxes, but the interview allows for greater explorations into like the stressors or the copings or the resources that the individuals would like. So, and there's different ways we're recruiting for the interview. So one way is through the survey, but another way is, you know, maybe through word of mouth, when you meet with your extension agent the next time, like, hey, would you participate in this interview? And so please say yes when they ask, right? or when anyone asks from our team, like, please, because your perspective and your input is, again, very valuable, because otherwise we're just going to be doing what we think. And, you know, that can be dangerous because, you know, I'm an academic. What do I know? Right. I'm just like reading. I don't know anything. So it's going to be relying on what's in the information that you share. Yeah. So the interviews is another way for us to get a deeper dive and insight.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Thao, for sharing about the SOW project. We're glad to be able to have you on the show today. to come and talk story with Shannon and I. Hope the listeners gain some insight about well-being and the project and the survey that's going to be headed out your way. So
yes,
please don't ignore it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Thao, for coming on. And for all of y'all, be sure to visit the Seeds of Wellbeing SOW website and our YouTube channel listed in the show notes, as well as the survey will be linked in both of those.
Mm-hmm. And for more additional information about this topic, you can see the SOW website, which will also be listed in our show notes of the podcast and the description box of our YouTube page. Please complete our SOW needs assessment survey. And thanks again for listening to the SOW podcast.
Sometimes called SOW.
Sometimes
depending on the day. And depending on
your background.
That's right. That's okay. You call it what you want. All right. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you listen to your podcast. Then stay tuned for next month, where we dive deeper into stressors related to farm production.
Ahui ho. Thank you for listening.
Mahalo.
Bye.